Okay, so I'll go ahead and provide an overview of the protocols, unless you want to do that, Dina?
I can.
Okay, go ahead. You're better at it than me.
Simultaneous Spanish interpretation is available for today's webinar. To join interpretation mode, please select the icon that looks like a globe at the bottom of the screen. Select Spanish and mute original audio. We ask that all participants choose a preferred audio channel, either English or Spanish. If your preferred language is Spanish and you wish to provide comments in Spanish during either of the public comment periods, we ask that you please do so from the Spanish interpretation audio channel. This is a working group meeting with limited time to address a full agenda. Please keep comments concise and to the point to allow all participants equal opportunity to speak. Our co-chairs and facilitators are here to keep us on track and ensure that all voices are heard. And our Spanish interpreter will now give these instructions in Spanish.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Hoy vamos a tener el servicio de interpretación al español disponible para este webinario. Para que ustedes puedan unirse al canal de interpretación, por favor seleccionen el icono que está en la parte inferior de su pantalla, que parece un globito que dice interpretación. Allí le dan seleccionar español. Después le dan silenciar el audio original. Y después y con eso queda activado. Si están utilizando un dispositivo móvil, lo que tienen que hacer es tocar su pantalla. Aparecerán 3 puntos. Probablemente aparezca la palabra more o más. Ahí seleccionan interpretación, escogen el idioma español y le dan silenciar al audio original y tienen que seleccionar la palabra done o terminar. Les pedimos a todos los participantes que escojan un canal en particular, ya sea el inglés o el español. Si su idioma preferido es el español y quieren hacer algún comentario en español durante cualquiera de los periodos de comentarios públicos, les pedimos que por favor hagan su pregunta desde el canal de interpretación en español. Esta es una reunión de trabajo con tiempo limitado que va a abordar un programa en particular, así que por favor mantenga sus comentarios concisos, directos al grano, para que todos los participantes tengan oportunidad de hablar. Nuestros anfitriones y el facilitador están aquí para mantener el orden y asegurarse de que se escuchen todas las voces. Gracias.
Thank you, Daniel. And we just ask that you pick a channel, Spanish or English.
Supervisor Poitras.
Yes, thank you.
That is.
So now Dina needs to go.
I'm sorry,
through-
Reverend Protocol. Sorry, I jumped ahead.
Okay,
That's okay. Dina, can you go ahead then with the rest of the protocols, please?
Microphones will be automatically muted. Video will be off for public attendees. Video will remain off for public attendees even while speaking. Post general questions in the Q&A box. Use the raise hand function to direct a question to the speaker or steering committee. For attendees that joined by phone, *9 is the raise hand function. Phone callers, please use *6 to unmute and mute yourself, not the mute function of your phone. There will be a public comment period at the end of the agenda. If you plan on commenting, add your name, agency, and subject matter to the Q&A box. When called upon to speak, staff will unmute your microphone, state your name, agency, organization, or special interest group if applicable. All speakers will be limited to 2 minutes. Staff will announce when your time is up and disable your microphone when your time is up.
Related to public comment, there are 2 opportunities for public comment during today's steering committee meeting. At the beginning of the meeting during agenda item 2, public comment related to items on the agenda, and during agenda item 8, public comment related to items not on the agenda. If you have comments related to specific projects within neighborhoods or communities, such as desiring a roundabout at an intersection, or the extension of transit service in the city of Madera or city of Chowchilla, please direct your comments to the city of Madera or Chowchilla staff. If the specific project is outside the city of Madera or Chowchilla, please direct your comments to county staff. MCTC staff is working on the regional transportation plan to accept project-specific comments and forward the comment to the responsible agency. This steering committee will be addressing major regional transportation projects along state highways and other major arterials that connect the cities and unincorporated communities, not specific project needs. This steering committee is a working group responsible for development of the Measure T Renewal Investment Plan. The committee will ultimately recommend approval of the plan to the Madera County Transportation Authority. It is the MCTA board that will take action to approve the plan and request that the Board of Supervisors place the ballot measure on the November 2022 ballot. So with that, I'll turn it over to the co-chairs.
Yeah, and also to that point, I think at the end of the day, it's not even the MCTA that makes the decision on this. It's the people when they vote, right? That's ultimately who the decision maker is in this process of whether or not that's what they want to see or not. So I think that's important that we keep that at the forefront of our minds, that ultimately the people decide. Supervisor Poitras, you had a...
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we get started, I think it's important that we address some concerns raised regarding the recent public ad placed in the Madera Tribune regarding this steering committee process by some of our sitting members. While everyone is entitled to their own opinions and how you go about doing that is entirely up to an individual, it is important to remember that everyone on this committee agreed to a set of rules regarding how you interact with the public and especially the media. While we are not going to agree on everything on this committee, it is important to be respectful to each other. This goes for everyone, no matter what group or agency you represent. The MCTC staff worked hard to gather as many voices as possible for this committee and have given hours and hours to accommodate requests from every meeting. MCTC has met you at the table and have extended a hand. It is up to an individual to want to do the same. As a reminder, we agreed on some of the following items or terms as a committee. Public and press contact. Is there some interference?
No, you're fine.
Okay, gotcha. Public and press contact. Issues or frustrations with committee proceedings should not be discussed publicly, but should be addressed within the committee process. Steering committee members are responsible for representing the interests and concerns of the organization, institutions, or constituencies that have appointed them. Full ground rules can be found on the MCTC website. The committee has not taken some of the actions noted in the ad as well. After the steering committee finishes its work and recommendations, it will go to the MCTC board and Board of Supervisors to decide if the measure should be placed on the ballot. I am confident that together we can all make transportation work for all of us in Madera County. We will only get there if we respect the process and respect each other. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Perfect. I think we figured that out. Thank you for that. I appreciate you bringing that up. All right, so introductions, and so this will be also used as a roll call. And we'll be calling on the members, right, that are voting members only, right, no alternates.
Correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dina.
Just who's here, Georgina, or everyone, but alternate?
I would say everyone.
Okay. Madera Chamber of Commerce, Debbie Bray. MVP Realty, John Reed. Red Barn Cafe owner, Lisa Soroyan. Visit Yosemite, Madera County, Rhonda Salisbury.
Here. Thank you.
City of Chowchilla, Councilmember Palmer.
Here.
City of Chowchilla, Rod Pruitt.
Here.
City of Chowchilla, Jason Rogers.
Here.
City of Madera, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Here.
City of Madera, Mayor Garcia. City of Madera, Arnaldo Rodriguez. City of Madera, Keith Helmuth.
Here.
City of Madera, Ellen Bitter.
Here.
City of Madera, David Huff. Valley Children's Hospital, Tim Curley.
I'm here.
Madera County Public Health, Sarah Bose.
Here.
Supervisor Frazier.
Here.
Supervisor Poitras.
Yes.
Joe, sitting in for Dave Barney.
Here.
Madera County Planning Department, Matt Traber.
Here.
Madera County Public Works Department, Jared Carter.
Here.
Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, Leticia Lucan.
Here.
Camarina Health Center, Paulo Soares. Camarina Health Center, Nicole Mosqueda. Madera County Farm Bureau, Christina Beckstead. Creekside Farming, Devinder Mahil.
I'm here.
Madera County Superintendent of Schools, Opie Ryer. Madera Community College, Dr. Angel Reyna. Cal Fire, Matt Watson. California Department of Transportation, Michael Navarro.
Here.
Building Industry Association of Fresno and Madera Counties, Michael Prandini.
Here.
Madera County Economic Development Commission, Bobby Kahn. Tahiti Chapter of the Sierra Club, Bill Thelbo. MCTC, MCTA, Patricia Taylor.
Here.
Central California Labor Council, Mike Lopez. Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, Frank Simonis.
Here.
Active Transportation Advocate, Jeffrey Wheeler.
Here.
San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, Dan Levitt.
Here.
Student Representative, Madera Community College, Jonathan Stormer. Our Community Advocate, Derek Robinson.
Here.
That covers us, Georgina.
Thank you. We're getting some feedback, so if everybody could go to mute, that might help. We'll find out. Hopefully it does.
All right, thank you. And unfortunately, there was a lot of people not here. I've gotten quite a few calls from people that don't want to come on anymore. And it's unfortunate that they're saying they don't feel like they have an opportunity to speak, and that there's so I'm still trying to get everyone to come in, but you know, we need to stay on point on these things and get through these meetings in a positive way. We're not going to agree on everything, but I think we all need to recognize that we're all trying to do something to that's going to be a betterment for our community. And I hope we can all just agree to continue down that path in a positive way to really have an impact for years and years to come. So appreciate all of you being here. We're going to be we'll take comments from committee members first, and then after there'll be the ability for the public and alternates to chime in. So I just wanted to, that's how we'll be going forward. And we'll move on to the public comment, item 2.
So we need the meeting minutes approved
Oh.
first. Sorry.
We'll do a meeting minutes by consensus. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Approve. Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Derek.
I'll second.
Councilmember Rodriguez seconds.
And I got Councilmember Rodriguez seconding. Is there anybody who's opposed to the meeting minutes or anything that needed changing? Seeing none, those pass. Now we'll move on to the public comment, item 2.
Are there any hands raised, Dina, or any questions?
Yes, it looks like we have Madeline Harris.
Thank you. I figured that this would be a good opportunity to say thank you for bringing up our statement in our press conference, because I also wanted to share a little bit about that and our possible future of engagement on the steering committee. So as you know, our organization, partner organizations, and residents that we work with have repeatedly brought up concerns with the rushed process on Measure T renewal and the lack of meaningful community engagement at steering committee meetings. And we have felt like our feedback has been ignored and pushed aside repeatedly. And so this is why we chose to make a public statement and conduct a press conference so that residents could share their feedback more widely, in hopes that it will now be addressed by MCTC in this committee. And as we've expressed before, we're really concerned with Measure T moving forward in 2022 as a forever tax or until ended by voters, because we don't believe it's fair or democratic to lock voters permanently into a plan that they didn't have a voice in shaping, and that future generations wouldn't be afforded the opportunity to vote on. And so, as was shared at the press conference and in several steering committee meetings before that, residents do want to see more active transportation, public transit, and local road maintenance investments in their communities, and have felt like they've been largely ignored or told to wait when asking for these investments in the past. So residents want to see a renewed measure that prioritizes their community needs. And instead of rushing those decisions in these committee meetings in the coming weeks about the rest of the investment plan and implementation guidelines concerning a forever tax, we're asking for this process to be paused so that meaningful engagement can take place, so that, you know, MCTC can go out to communities and ask them what they want public transit, roads, active transportation to look like in their communities, and so that community needs can be meaningfully addressed. So I guess our question to MCTC is if that's something that MCTC is willing to do, because if not, we can no longer in good faith participate in this committee. And I just also want to say, if we're being asked to not speak to the press regarding any perspectives except for MCTC or Madera County's perspectives, then obviously that's not something that we can agree to either, because Leadership Council's allegiance is always going to be to what residents that we work with want us to raise. So my question for MCTC is if pausing this and conducting a more meaningful community engagement process is something that you're willing to do at this point, because if not, then we are going to have to exit our role on the steering committee.
Rhonda?
Hi. I'm not even assured where to go with Madeline's comment there. I'm just going to make a comment on that. I, as a frustrated member of this committee, am tired of hearing over and over and over and over again about the same subjects that people are not listening. to this few group that wants to talk about Wi-Fi and public transportation, and active transportation, these things. We are a committee that is trying to get a measure passed to make our roads safer, to do public transportation, to do all these things that we've been looking at. But we're constantly having to go back over and over and over and over and over these same subjects from Madeline. And I love your passion, Madeline. But we need to get to the meat of this. Without Measure T, we have no roadways, we have no transportation, we have none of this stuff. So we need to get to the meat of this. And I don't think the public can help. Doing things by committee of 140,000 people don't work. That's why this committee is so diverse. So I love passion, I love that, but I think if we actually look at the docs and actually listen to what the experts have to say, and we all have these wonderful discussions about the actual material, I think we'll get somewhere, and then we can go out to our public and really get this process completed. Without it, we have no roads.
Thank you, Rhonda. Any other comments? Well, I'll call close to the public comment night.
Supervisor Frazier, you've got 2 attendees with hands raised.
They're not popping up on the top of my screen. Where are they?
If you, they're in the attendee side.
Oh, on the participants. Okay. All right. Maria Garcia first.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es María García. Trabajo para Centro Binacional para Desarrollo Indígenas Oaxaqueños. Yo tengo 4 puntos que agregar un señal de alto en las calles Sharwood y Lake Street porque han pasado muchos accidentes en esa área y es peligroso para los niños que transitan ahí en las mañanas y en las tardes que van a la escuela. Esa es una. La otra es mejorar el transporte público para las personas mayores y agregar más transporte público para ellos porque no hay muchos en las áreas fuera del condado de Madera. Y la otra es, he hablado con la comunidad de La Vina. La comunidad de La Vina han pedido que les arreglen las calles por Road 23, 24 y 27, a la avenida 8, avenida 8 y media y 7. Lo han pedido mucho tiempo atrás y nadie ha ido a arreglar las calles de ellos, poner más postes de luces porque las noches están oscuras y también la escuela Eastern Arcola. Los carros hacen carreras en esas calles, especialmente en la calle Road 29 y medio y la avenida 8 y media, la 8. Y no hay nada, señales que a los niños cruzan ahí para la escuela, no hay banquetas y estaría bien que pusieran como un tope para que los carros no sigan haciendo carreras ahí. Y el otro es posible que podrían tener la junta más tarde de 5 y media para que así la comunidad esté más informado de lo que está pasando con la medida T, porque tengo entendido que hasta el 2024 es cuando se va a renovar de nuevo. So, hay tiempo para que puedan tener más reuniones. Gracias.
Thank you. All right, Amalia Bernardo.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amalia Bernardo with Centro Binacional para el Desarrollo Indígena Oaxaqueña. And I just want to reiterate what the communities we work with have said. A lot of the communities we work with have said their concerns are not being addressed. They want the streets fixed. They want their communities more safe for them and their families. And also a lot of the Madera residents we have talked to have said that the county seems to be paying more attention to the affluent areas. And they want the county to be putting the same amount of effort they're putting in certain areas in Madera as in their community as well. And also, I want to say that this steering committee is rushing this whole process. Why rush to put Measure T on the 2022 ballot and make it a permanent tax? Because that is what it is. There should be more meetings and more outreach to inform the community about Measure T and ask them what their needs are. From our part, we've been doing a lot of outreach, and a lot of the Madera residents we have talked to have said that it was their first time hearing about Measure T, and a lot of the times they direct their anger towards us because they think we are MCTC and they think we're the ones that are not addressing their concerns. But what we're doing is informing them about Measure T. So I just want to also say that we did talk to the press conference last week about our concerns, since I feel like the steering committee isn't really addressing any of these concerns. Thank you.
And Leticia.
Hi, Leticia with Leadership Council. Let me put my hand down. I just wanted to address Rhonda's comment. So we continue to bring up the same issues because a lot of folks feel like they've been overlooked, and that's kind of the reality. Like, so for example, the percentages are not enough to fix all roads. And a lot of these communities have not seen improvements or benefited from Measure T dollars, even though they're paying into it. So as the percentages stand right now, it's just not enough. And those needs have been, people have been sharing those needs for a very long time. That's why we keep bringing it up, not because, you know, there's no reason for it. Like, there is a reason. If we're getting to the meat, then we have to focus on trying to help communities, especially disadvantaged, unincorporated communities that, you know, that are not benefiting from this, even though they're also paying into it. So just wanted to address that real quick. Thank you.
I don't see any more, and just to those points, those are meaningful discussions to engage in. The problem is, like, from the very beginning, there was a push saying that there is no community outreach, that we don't do anything with the community, that we don't know, we're not listening to them. I've been at many meetings with you at both Lavinia and Fairmead, as well as other communities that are very similar in terms of demographic and where they're located in the same needs. And those are the needs that we hear, is that the roads need to be fixed. And that's where, like, listening to what everyone wants to do is fix the roads. But from the very beginning, it's been a push and kind of demonizing the entire process, and acting as though there has not been any outreach to any communities, and that the push is always into other areas. And it's just not true, and it's an unfair assertion. And then even to say you'll leave the process because we're not going to engage in meaningful outreach is unfortunate, and it's an unfair characterization of everybody that sits on this steering committee that is dedicated our lives to trying to help our community, all of them. And I know that if you leave, that's going to be the message, is that we didn't want to do that. And it just makes me upset, sad that's what will be taken away from it. Because this is a group of a very diverse group that's trying to actually do something positive. And I think that's what we need to remember. And if you want to leave, I would just ask that it's because it's your choice, not because we're not trying to engage or do outreach. Because you know for a fact, you've sat with me at meetings, you know that I've come more than probably any supervisor in the past to those meetings. I've set up private meetings to bring in the residents. I've sat at a negotiation table on the same side as you to get more for Fairmead than they would have gotten otherwise. You know the passion that I have. You've seen it from everybody else here. And so we need to move forward in a positive way. And I hope that we can all do that together and continue to focus on fixing the roads, because you can't have a bus or a bike if you don't have the roads up to a good level. That is the biggest piece of the puzzle that we need to focus on, is to get people to be able to, whether they have a car or they're in a bus, it needs to be a road that is passable. And that's the focus that we should continue to look at and to continue to push for. And so I hope we can all do that and moving forward and not picking apart the process. There's no perfect process. If no matter how much outreach we do, there's going to be someone that gets missed. So we just need to use our collective influences in different areas to get the message out, to hear what people are asking for, and to do what the people want. And again, at the end of the day, the people are going to vote and say what it is that they want. And if we're wrong, that's on us. That's we missed something. I don't think we are, though. So that's my piece. I see that there's 2 more hands raised. So Councilmember Rodriguez, and then
yes. Thank you, Chair Fraser. I just wanted to chime in and comment that I've now been sitting on the MCTC now. I think this is going on my 3rd year, and I do have to say that when I first came into the committee here, or the organization, I recall the unmet transit needs. And when that came about, obviously that was a little confusing because there's so many unmet transit needs in our county. But what are the needs of a common need within the county, right? And I think MCTC has always been transparent in trying to provide information. There's people from Lavina that have come before the Transportation Commission, people from other areas in regards to these unmet needs. And I think it's been very transparent in the way it does the outreach, in the way it tries to have more engagement, so that we as transportation commissioners can take that into account and seek for any additional funding, if any. Now, I think we all know that these particular sales tax dollars can't really reach for every request that's out there. It's just not, there's no way, there's just no way. There's not enough money out there to be able to address every single request in every single place. But one thing that we can do as a steering committee is we can agree that there are transportation needs that can serve the vast majority, or not so much the affluent, because I heard that come across. Madera County in itself is a disadvantaged community in itself, and there's certain areas that are probably underserved more than others, but in general, I think Madera County in itself is disadvantaged in many ways. But I think we're trying to work as a common interest for transportation needs for the region, and that's one thing that I learned to understand. But I serve the city. I can't speak for Lavinia, I can't speak for Fermit, and I can't speak for Chowchilla. But there's so many projects out there that are in need, and there's just not enough funding. So whatever funding we get from the transportation dollars or Measure T, we have to wait for these capital improvement projects that can take up to 5 years. And at times they're not met. They're not met because there's not additional funding to do so. So this goes on and prolongs and prolongs. We're always trying to leverage these dollars. And this is a way we utilize the Measure T dollars, is to leverage other funding sources to help us generate the dollars that we need. I live in I think a well-established neighborhood that doesn't have any sidewalks down Mainbury, and I'm waiting for that to happen at some point. But I know that's not the focus of this thing. It's not, the focus isn't to put sidewalks down Mainbury. The focus is to find the common transportation needs that we all can work on, that we all can agree on. And I know we're not going to please every single individual organization within this deal, but I think we're going to reach a consensus of where we want to distribute these or allocate these funds. And I think that if we keep that in mind, now that can be changed through this committee. We can certainly say, well, let's take more funds and put it more into more active transportation, or we can do something with more regional whatever this steering committee can do, yes, but to satisfy every single individual request, I think that might be impossible because there's not enough funding to do so. So we have to concentrate on the common interests that we all share. And I just want to throw that out there because I know it's frustrating. And I understand the passion that's behind the organization, such as Madeline and Leticia and Amalia. I really appreciate your passion. But know that we're an organization and we want to help. Can we help every single one individual request? No. Do we want to have more engagement through public? Yes. And that's the transparency that I believe we're trying to provide and try to work together. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Derek, and then Diana.
Yes, I'd say that I noticed a lot of improvement. Like for instance, Adele Street, it was one of the worst streets with potholes, whatever. But now that's has been repaired, and the street leading toward the bridge, I forgot the name of the street right now, but that's repaired. And 16th Street, that was one of my main concerns. That's been repaired. It's a process. It might be a little slow, but you know, sooner or later, streets and different transportation projects, they do get improved. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Councilmember Palmer.
Hi, this is Diana Palmer from City of Chowchilla. And I completely agree with Councilmember Rodriguez. MCTC does a great job about trying to reach out to all the different regions. And I'd like to just say again, I feel like I almost say it every meeting, but without Measure T, we have to rely on the state and federal government for grants and transportation dollars. Now, being that we are a smaller city, smaller county, these grants are often given to larger cities and larger counties. We have to compete for those, and those dollars are very competitive, and our region struggles to get those dollars now. Some of the reason we only get them now is because we have matching dollars. If Measure T goes away, which it could if there is a lot of opposition or negative press, then those local dollars will no longer be available for any programs, not green programs, not pedestrian programs, not roads, potholes, any of it. So we really do need to be careful and considerate. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like there's no more. So I'll call it close to public comment. And item 3. Oh, you still on public comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to address some of the things said. I totally hear you. And Supervisor Frazier, I know you have engaged a lot with communities that we work with, and that's great. We want to continue working with you wherever possible. But I want to get clear about what we mean by community engagement. So we mean that this process should be led by neutral facilitators, that there should be workshops in community where folks are asked, what do you want public transit to look like in your community? What investments to roads do you want to see get prioritized? And then a steering committee can help shape the plan, you know, based on that feedback. But then we're also being told that the community engagement that our organization has helped facilitate is, I guess, counting as the community engagement for this plan. But then we're not seeing that feedback actually get incorporated when it comes to things like, as Councilmember Rodriguez mentioned, the unmet transit needs process every year, where folks that we work with have continually raised, you know, unmet transit needs, and then we get told that they're not reasonable to meet year after year. And then we see in the existing Measure T plan that only 2% of the funds go to public transit. And now only 4% is being proposed to public transit. So it seems pretty clear that that's maybe one of the reasons why those unmet transit needs aren't getting addressed, right? And so these are some of the points of feedback that residents have raised through the community engagement that we've helped facilitate, that we want to make sure is incorporated into the plan. And I think that's really something that needs to be revisited. But then I also just want to say we are not opposed to local transportation sales taxes like Measure T. Like I believe they're so important, just like everybody on this call. We just want residents to be able to shape that investment plan and where those tax dollars go, and feel like they're being heard when they raise, needs for additional funding for things like public transit, for prioritization of maintenance to local roads, and not, capacity expanding projects when the jurisdictions are already unable to maintain existing roadways. So I just wanted to say I totally hear what everybody's saying. And if the process is going to continue to be rushed to the November 2022 ballot, then based on the feedback we've heard from residents that we don't feel has been significantly addressed, we're not going to be able to proceed.
Okay, thank you. All right, item 3. Who's taking this one? Are they on mute?
It should be Georgina. There you go.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Okay, so before we get into the actual allocations that we worked with the local agencies on since the last meeting, I wanted to refresh everyone's memory regarding the programs that have been approved and the sub-programs that have been approved by this committee in the past. So we have the Community and Neighborhood Streets and Roads program, and under that we have 4 sub-programs. The Local Neighborhood and Major Streets Maintenance, that's a maintenance program, potholes, drainage improvements, etc. Local road improvements, so that would include some lane widening, of course, operational improvements such as traffic signals, safety improvements, etc. And then flexible, which is a transportation funding source that the local agencies can use to finance any transportation related project to address their local needs. And then the Regional Streets, Roads, and Highways program, which would address connectivity between the various communities. So it would include all state routes as well as major routes that provide for those connections between communities. We also have the public transit program, and all of the 3 agencies would receive funding from the public transit program to use on these various different types of eligible projects. And these are example projects. Once we get further down the road here, we will identify the specific projects that should be used or that should receive these specific funds. Likely all of these will be on the list. And then we've got the active transportation, bicycle, pedestrian, and trails program. So it would include all types of programs or all types of projects that are bike or pedestrian trail friendly. And then we've got the clean transportation and new technologies. This would be, this needs to be changed. It's no longer a competitive program as of the last meeting. These funds would go directly to the local agencies based on population share, and they could be used for all of these different types of eligible projects. So those were the programs. At the last 2 meetings ago, you had actually approved an allocation to all of these different programs, these 4 different programs. And we came back to you at the last meeting and asked you to, so this was what was approved originally. We had 57.5 to the local streets and roads program, 30 to regional, 4 to active, 4 to transit, 3 to clean technology, and 1.5% to administration planning. We came back to you last week, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago, and we asked you to break down that 57.5% into what should actually go to maintenance, what should go to local, and what should go to the flexible. We had already provided for an allocation to regional. So this is the original proposal brought forth by staff, 57.5 with these allocations to those sub-programs under the community and neighborhood program. Then based upon discussion at the last meeting, this steering committee meeting, there was a motion on the floor before we left, it's still on the floor, to take that 57.5% and allocate 40% of it to maintenance, 5% to local streets and roads program, and then 12.5 to flexible. There were, however, some issues on the part of local agencies that this 5% may be too low for them to, a 5% allocation would be less during the first year, less funding than they receive currently for local streets and roads. So there was some discussion about working with the local agencies. There was also some discussion about actually lowering the regional allocation to maybe increase some funding in the community and neighborhood, these other 3 sub-programs, to bring those local streets and roads sub-program back up to a reasonable amount that would be consistent with what they're currently receiving. So this was the steering committee motion. It's still on the floor. So following that last meeting on April 14th, I believe it was, we met with the local agencies. We sat down with them and we went through these allocations, and based upon that meeting, this is what we came up with. To reduce the regional program down to 25%, that would provide, it would go from about 160 million a year, 160 million total to 216, almost 17 million. That would increase the community and neighborhood to 62.5 for the allocation to these other sub-programs. So 35% to maintenance, which is consistent. It's lower than what the steering committee motion was, but it's higher than what the original proposal was. So 35% to maintenance, 15 to local streets and roads sub-program, which gets the local agencies back to a level that they're currently receiving from the measure, and then 12.5 for flexible. So this is the local agency proposal. I welcome the City of Madera, the City of Chowchilla, the County of Madera, as well as MCTC staff to provide any additional detail they would like.
All right, looks like we have a question from Frank.
Thank you, Supervisor. On any of these proposals, if we were to renew this for, let's say, 30 years, does our PCI continue to degrade until our roads no longer exist under these numbers? Or will this actually begin to increase our PCI to what we can start freeing up, honestly, wasted money on maintenance, since we're spending, what, $50 to $60 a square yard instead of $2.50 a square yard? Because once we get our PCI up, we will free up tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that we could put toward all the programs we want. So my concern is, are we improving our PCI on these numbers, or does it continue to degrade? Thank you.
Frank, thank you for that question. I had actually, just thinking about this in between our last meeting, had just talked with Matt Trieber about if we could plug in this number into our pavement management system, will it shoot out what the PCI will be after 5 years, after 10 years with this funding. And apparently it's not just as easy as clicking in a number and seeing a calculator that does it, that there's some things that go into that, but I think that would be good information to have. And Matt or Jared, can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe what we can do, at least on the county side, our pavement management system does have the ability for us to, plug in. That's really how we do a lot of things in utilizing that when we have our SB1 allocations and we have to do project lists, right? We plug the amount of dollars that we anticipate getting into our pavement management system, and it spits out what roadways and what treatments we should be doing on those roadways. And so I guess to Frank and your comments there, Chairman, I think we should be able to take that 152 million, this is over the 30-year, right? Plug that into our pavement management system. It's going to spit out and identify those roadways. Part of that calculation, because there is, as we all know, and why we're sitting here and why this is so important for everybody, there's just not enough dollars, right? We get at the county level, $10 to $12 million a year to maintain, the same amount of lanes, same amount of mileage that, our agencies in larger counties get 60, 70 million a year. And so we have to prioritize those routes based on the amount of traffic that's on those and arterials and the like. But we can certainly look at that and see what that would bring our PCI levels to with that influx of the measured cash to see what that brings our PCI level to a countywide status. So it's a good exercise. Jared, before your brain explodes there and your head pops off, I want to make sure you don't have any comments to add to that, but it is a bit of an exercise to put it into our system, but we should be able to put that in there and have it spit out what the anticipated PCI levels would be following that.
I'd like to mention that I believe that the maintenance need was about 1.2 or 1.3 billion for the county, not just for Madera County, but all the jurisdictions within the county. When we asked the local agencies to provide us with their need to get to their cost to get to a PCI of either 70 or 75, I believe that total came to about 1.2 billion. So even if we took 100% of this measure and allocated it toward maintenance, there would still be a shortfall. But keep in mind, this is an until ended by voters measure. So it's going beyond 30 years. One, there will be a dedicated source of funding toward maintenance for the long term. There will be an increase in the PCI as a result of the influx of these additional funds from Measure T. There's also the opportunity to bond ahead because we have an until ended by voters. Even a 30-year measure will enhance the ability for MCTA to bond for these funds and actually get a lot of projects, a lot of maintenance projects, as well as other projects in place sooner at a lower cost. So I wanted to make sure that that was understood.
Well, that's good information. Thank you, Georgina. Keith?
Yes, thanks. I just want to go ahead and say, yeah, I think that these funds, along with other funding that we have, will increase our PCI. Ellen Vitter and myself, we were just discussing this, and this will increase our available funding for maintenance by about 60%. And then I've mentioned this before, but I just want to go ahead and reiterate. There is a class of funding that's only been available to agencies for 3, 4, 5 years, and that's the Road Maintenance Rehabilitation Program. That gives us about an additional $1 million a year for road maintenance that we didn't have 3, 4, 5 years ago. Between this and that, yeah, I feel confident that our PCI will be increasing.
Thank you. Frank? Actually, Frank, do you mind if we go with Rod and Jeffrey and then back to you? Is that all right? Just so we hear. Rod?
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say that this proposed percentage split, I think it addresses the needs that we are getting input from in our community, and provides some flexibility as well. The flex is important in the fact that not the needs of all the different organizations are not the same. And so you want to be able to address your community needs specifically, but everybody's needs are in maintenance. We all know that. So increasing some of the percentage split to maintenance while still allowing some flexibility for other programs, I think is a win for everybody. This took money away from the regional projects, which right now, I believe MCTC had mentioned somewhere in the neighborhood of 28% would be needed to maintain the current level. So I think there is a shift in this model to more focus on some maintenance of local roads and still allow some flexibility for some other programs that would include every category on here, whether it's regional transit, ATP, clean technology, anything. So I think this is a better split and it works for everybody. Thank you.
Which split was that, Rod?
The one that we're looking at right now, the 62.5 total for community and neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Jeffrey? I think you're muted.
Thank you, Supervisor Frazier. I would be in favor of reducing the amount for clean and new technology and putting that also to community and neighborhood maintenance programs. And 35% still seems pretty low. Even 40% is low, but I don't see the clean and new technology being beneficial to a large group of people. The things that will really help are the transit. So I think that the benefit for the clean and new technology is low unless I'm overlooking something. Okay, and if you can take anything away from any new roads or lane widenings, I think instead of increasing the burden of things that have to be maintained, let's maintain what we've got until we get to a sustainable point. I think that would be better. Thank you.
I might just mention that the 12.5% flexible can be used for any transportation purpose. So if a local agency, the county or one of the two cities, desires to take that entire 12.5% and allocate it toward maintenance, it has the opportunity to do that. In addition, the 15% to local streets and roads subprogram includes a lot of operational projects. It also includes, there is some lane widening, there is some shoulder widening. So those projects will also enhance maintenance of those facilities over time.
Thank you. Frank and then Tim.
Thank you, Supervisor. In order to keep our monies so that we can qualify for grants and things, and looking at these numbers, I believe Measure T is, we brought it up before, is it 7 or 8% of what the actual transportation budget is? It's just a small piece of the pie. That being the case, could we, from this committee, make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that they increase maintenance dollars spent from other sources outside of Measure T so that we can not have our roads continue to degrade while still preserving qualifying programs that we have through Measure T? Thank you.
I think Troy, if you could respond to that.
Are the percentage?
Right, the percentage, and then other available funding, and what the state and federal governments are starting to really focus on outside of streets and roads.
As far as a percentage, I would need to look it up really quick. That was a few meetings ago. Anyways, there are a lot of other available funding, and is any funding that we receive usually has, especially federal funding, certain restrictions. And so there is some flexibility on certain programs, and some programs can be spent on maintenance that is being spent on other projects by the cities and the county. But that is something that can be looked at. However, there is still a need, or what we're hearing from our local agencies, there's still a need for projects, for operational projects, for gap closure projects, for improving the traffic circulation type projects. And so they need that money for those type of projects. But I think that you make a good point, is if maintenance is our need or our struggle, we should be evaluating everything to see, can we, is it possible? And that's an exercise that's probably worthwhile. If you give me a second, I'll look up the percentage.
Thank you. I'll let you look that up while Tim Curley.
Yep, thank you, Supervisor. Georgina, just very quickly, what's the difference between maintenance subprogram and local streets road subprogram?
Yeah, I'll go back up to the definition up here. So under the maintenance program, it's really just looking at street repair, pothole repair, pavement, AC overlays, asphalt concrete overlays, drainage improvements, other related improvements. So just maintaining the base and the pavement condition to the extent possible. Under local road improvements, that would include lane widening, adding a lane in each direction, conversion to a higher capacity facility, which means going from an arterial to an expressway. Not too many of those types of projects in Madera County. A gap project, as mentioned before, where you might have 4 lanes on one end of a facility and 4 lanes on the other, but it's 2 lanes in between. And for whatever reason, those additional lanes are not going to be accommodated by new development. If they can be accommodated by new development, then they will be part of the funding mix. extending a facility. So if there's need to continue a facility further out, then that would be covered. But again, if it's to accommodate new development, that's not something that we'll be looking at as a high priority. Railroad grade separation projects, so separating the railroad tracks from the actual road itself to enhance safety. Other operational improvements like traffic signals, shoulder improvements, as I mentioned before, channelization, roundabouts, passing lanes, fiber optics, all of those different types of operational improvements that will enhance traffic flow and improve safety along a road or a street or road. Other types of safety improvements, and then smart corridors. Probably not too many of these facilities will reflect smart corridors, probably more in the regional streets and roads, but there are some applications of smart corridors that may be applicable to some of these facilities, like along Avenue 12, maybe along some of the other east, west, and north-south major streets within the communities. Flexible, again, is funds that can be used by a local agency to address their own community needs that their residents believe should be targeted and prioritized. And that can affect any transportation purpose, whether it's streets, roads, transit, bikes, whatever. And then the Regional Streets and Roads Program, and we'll be getting to that one on the next agenda item, but it's regional streets and roads, highway improvements, etc. So those are the different types of improvements that can be made with each one of these pots of funding.
All right, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I too like the local agency proposal that's before us here. I feel that if you ask any constituency or any constituent about, especially any survey that's in regards to transportation, the first thing that comes out is fix my roads, fix the potholes. So I think, increasing that section there certainly helps. Obviously, the regional, at 25%. I'd love to see that a little bit lower, maybe divert some of that to either transit or active transportation. But I think the way it sits now, it looks good. Georgina, a question for you is, as the needs continue to change in the future, is this a flexible plan or a flexible proposal that we can bring back and make adjustments as needed?
Yes, we mentioned that before, since this will be until ended by voters plan. We're looking at 30 years here, just 30 years out, pretty consistent with the regional transportation plan. But there are going to be increments that you'll decide on what those increments should be. Should it be 10 years? Should it be 15 years? That the plan will be revisited and looked at in terms of how have things changed? What funding is available for all these different types of programs and projects? Has there been an influx in transit funding? What are the transit needs? Has there been a shift in the desire to go from single occupant vehicles to transit, or to start walking and biking more, depending upon how the land use pattern has also changed throughout the county? So that increment can be either 10 or 15 years. I wouldn't recommend going beyond 15 years. So definitely we can revisit this as necessary.
Thank you. And to that point, I think, like you said, as we continue to shift in the way we provide transportation, whether it be technology and what have you, I think the needs also change. And at that time, I think would be appropriate for us to possibly revisit and see what the needs are at that time. But I do like this proposal because, again, it gives more flexibility, not only to your local cities and neighborhoods, but also, it gives our agencies control of where they'd like to spend that. So I certainly am in favor of this. Again, I've made my comments in regards to the regional. I know it's something that we, as your steering committee agencies, can see the need for the regional transportation and multimodal type of transportation, and that's why we advocate for that as well. We certainly don't want to leave that behind, because it's such a big part of our community and how we transport goods and services. I think if you talk to any constituent, their biggest need would be fix my roads down the street. But I think if we see it as a whole, it's how do we get products and services across the road, and what corridors we use. And this is where the regional section comes in. But I certainly favor this proposal. I'd like to continue with that if that's possible.
Thank you. Jeff Wheeler?
Thank you, Supervisor Frazier. I would like to see the other slide, which details the funding for the different programs. I would like to say that lane widening and shoulder widening will contribute to the maintenance burden. The more pavement needs to be maintained in the future. Also, lane widening is detrimental to safety, going from a 10-foot wide lane to a 12-foot wide lane will increase speeds and increase accidents, increase collisions. It is not a good thing in general to widen lanes. I would also think that we would want to, before we decide on the split, we should table this until we hear some of the analysis from Mr. Trevor for a few different scenarios. And I would also say that the freeway service patrol does not seem very necessary as compared to our maintenance needs. Thank you.
Thank you. And Frank?
I would just like to address the comment about lane widening, making the roads less safe, and offer an opposing point of view. Myself, having been a first responder, sheriff's office, fire department, and a paramedic all in this county, I see that the other way around. Vehicles need a way to pull over to allow emergency vehicles to go by, especially if that ambulance is transporting your child to the hospital. So lane widening, adding passing lanes, putting in turnout lanes actually will improve our emergency services as needed. Yes, it will increase the cost of maintenance, but our county is growing and we have to be mindful of that on the steering committee. We're one of the few counties growing in the state, which means we have more revenue dollars to come in the future, which will be helpful to offset the cost of lane widening and road improvements. But I just wanted to address that one comment with a different point of view coming from the line of work that I've been in. Thank you.
And also, I've been driving around in some of your areas, and sometimes you're lucky to get a 10-foot wide lane up there too. So there would be some lane widening that would be of great value of safety. Mike Navarro.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. I was going to add some context on lane widening conversation from I guess from a Caltrans perspective. I think it really just depends on the application we're talking about. If we're talking like 10-foot lanes on a freeway, obviously we're not looking at stuff like that on a high-speed roadway, but it is an application that we tend to use in more of a setting for, I'll use State Route 145, for example, like a Main Street setting. We do look for the narrower lanes for traffic as a traffic calming feature. So I don't think it's a one size fits all on the 10 or 12-foot lanes, but subject to application. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much. All right, any other comments? There is still a motion. Can you put it to the motion that's on the floor? That one. So, okay, so I think everyone was now looking at the 62.5. Would it be like a regional still at the 25? Then this is at 45 and 17.5.
Yeah, this was 57.5 for these three sub-programs. The local agency proposal is to take the regional down 5%, bump this up to 62.5, and then allocate that 62.5 to these sub-programs as shown. So the first motion is on the floor, however, so this is carried over from the last meeting.
Jeff, I know you had talked about that other allocation of 62.5. Did you want to amend your motion at all? And I believe the seconder of the motion is not here. That was John Reed. So I don't know if I need a new motion or not,
So we're taking 5% from regional and
bringing it up here.
Right. What about taking out of clean new technology?
There was discussion about that at the local agency level, and they felt that it was important to leave that 3% there to address clean and new technology modes.
Don't we have to have a certain low, don't we have to have 3% in terms of being able to get grants, or I think the state requires having at least 3% in there. Is that correct? Troy or Patricia?
No, not for Measure T. So there will be that 3% is a minimum, so that will be allocated to the local agencies. Clean and new technology will be a part of every transportation mode, of course, but this guarantees a minimum going to the local agencies for such types of projects.
Have we heard then from the city of Madera, city of Chowchilla, and the county of Madera that a 35, 15, 12 and a half split would be acceptable to all these?
Yes, we worked with the local agencies and they've all agreed to this allocation.
Okay, well, what about the voters? As Frank Simones has said, that it would be best if it was 90% going to maintenance. Then if we only have 35% going to maintenance, and we say this is, and the voters are going to know, hey, my roads didn't get fixed with 35%. Is it going to fly? If it's going to get voted on in what is it, November?
Yes.
Or if we say 35% for maintenance, and the citizens are going to say, okay.
Yes, the citizens identified, they had some top priorities and they were all streets and roads related. So they included local streets and roads, so congestion relief, better connectivity between communities. The maintenance, of course, was number one. So that's why it has the highest percentage of any of the programs. Again, the flexible percentage can be used for maintenance. So that if you were to use, if a local agency wanted to use all of the flexible and add it to maintenance, that would take it up to less than 50% of the measure going toward maintenance for their community. So
right, but when the Measure T goes on the ballot, it's not going to really say, hey, you can use the flexible for maintenance. It's just going to say 35% maintenance. That's what the voters are going to see.
The actual ballot language will not provide percentages. The investment plan will be a part of the ballot, and so that detail will be in there. But the actual language, the ballot language, will not include percentages.
Okay, well, if all the local entities are in favor of this one, I'll modify my my motion and ask for a second.
So this is the one you want as presented?
Yes,
that's what.
Okay.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I'll second it.
All right. Frank, comments on this?
I could be in favor of this as well. I'd like to know if we could add a caveat that as a steering committee, we send a recommendation statement to MCTC and the board that says, this does not give us enough money ultimately to improve our PCI. Please look for alternative funding sources and toward maintenance from the other 92% that funds transportation, so that we can work toward improving our PCI and getting it up to the goal of 75, which will then free up millions of spent dollars on maintenance that we could then use for other things. Add that recommendation statement that we need to really look hard for additional maintenance monies outside of Measure T.
Great.
And there, I should add that as part of the implementing guidelines and performance measures, we will be looking at how well the allocation of these funds to the maintenance program and the allocation and the implementation of projects by the local agencies, how well they are doing toward increasing that PCI. So if at some point it's shown that they're not increasing the PCI, yet they're allocating those maintenance dollars, then we're going to have to figure out why. So that's something that will definitely be looked at over time.
Thank you. Matt Schreiber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm ready to vote. I certainly concur with Frank's comments. And I think in our chat there, I think Troy McNeil, thank you, Troy, for that comment. I mean, I think that's hitting it right on the head. That should be front and center in our campaign to get this thing passed, is that, you know, we're getting 60% higher maintenance dollars than our current measure with this breakdown. So with that, I'm ready to vote.
Well, thanks for letting us know that you're ready to vote. All right, is there any other comments? If not, roll call, please.
Who seconded?
Supervisor Poitras. Why did you want to do that, Rod? Because he'll withdraw it so you can do it.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I'm sorry, I missed it. My apologies. I have no problem seconding it, but you already did, so we're good.
Keep in mind that when you vote, only one staff member from each agency can vote, including city managers, and then one elected official from each agency as well, except for the county, which has 2 votes from elected officials.
Rhonda Salisbury,
Yes. I'm back.
Councilmember Palmer,
Yes.
Rod or Jason, City of Chowchilla,
This is Rod, yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Arnaldo Rodriguez,
I'll be voting for Arnaldo. Yes. This is Keith, City Madera.
thank you, Keith. Tim Curley,
Yes.
Sarah Bose,
Yes.
Supervisor Frazier,
Yes.
Supervisor Poitras.
Yes.
Our other Madera County vote. Jared, Matt, Joe,
Yes.
Leticia Lucan,
Leadership Council abstains.
Devinder Mahill,
The vendor,
Michael Navarro.
are you there?
Yes, well, I'll come back to him, Georgina.
Okay.
Michael Navarro,
Abstain.
Michael Prandini,
Yes.
Patricia Taylor,
Yes.
Frank Simonis,
Yes.
Jeffrey Wheeler. Dan Levitt, and Derek Robinson.
Yes.
Tina, what
Devinder,
was,
go ahead,
what was the
Georgina.
vote from Wheeler and Levitt?
No, I don't,
Then
I
Levitt
think
had to drop off. He just let me know
Okay.
before.
And Jeffrey Wheeler, did he vote?
Jeffrey did not, and Devinder Mahill would be the last one.
Jeffrey made the motion, Dina.
Okay. So just Devinder.
Okay.
All right, looks like it passed. Good job, everybody.
That was easy.
Yeah. All right, item 4, regional project listing.
Yes.
Well, change this because it's now 25%, not 30%.
Right. So we've also been working with the local agencies to identify projects. We started with projects, as I mentioned previously. I can't remember which slides I had in here. So I just wanted to bring up the Regional Streets and Highways program to remind you they are major streets, roads, highway improvements. And they came from the 2022 RTP SCS, and they'll continue to come from future RTPs that are developed over time. And the goal with this funding source is to leverage state and federal dollars to the extent possible. So some of the program highlights are that it would, as we mentioned previously, would include all state routes and highways. They would be major expressways or arterials, and they would be linking, these corridors would be linking cities and communities, and they would be considered projects connecting two or more cities and or communities. And they would be, as I just mentioned, identified from the Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy documents, also from the 2021 Project Prioritization Database. I should have that down by now. And then from local agencies as well as from Caltrans. So during development of the 2021 Project Prioritization Database, we reached out to all of the local agencies as well as Caltrans and asked them for a list of projects that should be incorporated and considered as the 2022 RTP SCS is developed. And so that has been completed. There's quite a bit of information in that database. It will need to be continually updated. There's some information that's still needed, but we really drew these projects from that primary source, as well as the 2018 RTP. Other modal plans also went into the 2021 database, whether they be active transportation or otherwise. We work very closely with the transit agencies. Ellen Moy with Moy & Associates worked very close with the transit agencies to identify all the various transit improvement projects that would be needed, operations projects as well over the life of the RTP and this measure. And then the local agencies also submitted additional projects as they were trying to address mobility needs within their jurisdictions. And then, of course, we also received listings from Caltrans. So this just provides you with an overview of how the regional transportation plan process feeds into the measure. I think you've seen this before when we first started, but you can see that the future transportation projects, programs, and cost by mode are reflected from the RTP SCS. There are funding estimates and funding sources that are identified. From there, we also are able to prioritize those improved mobility projects on the regionally significant system. Public engagement is extensive throughout this entire process as the regional transportation plan is being prepared by MCTC. On the other side, on the Measure T side, the renewal process, we've got transportation programs and needs that come from the regional transportation plan and feed into our assessment. We determine the funding shortfall, which we presented to you in previous meetings. And then, of course, there's been quite a bit of outreach and engagement together with the engagement that's been done for the RTP. And that has led us to the funding program allocations that you've just approved, as well as the sub-programs. And that leads us to the various different types of programs that we have available for Measure T funding. And from there, that regional transportation plan is where we're at now. We're here at this point, the bottom of the list here. So we've made quite a bit of progress. This is, I think, our 13th or 14th meeting. So we've had quite a bit of time with each other to work through all of these issues. These are tier 1 and tier 2. Potentially, we may not be identifying a tier 1 and tier 2, given that this is an until ended by voters measure. We may just be identifying projects that can be implemented within the next 10 to 15 years to ensure that we can promise what we deliver. So the needs assessment has been a part of this process. And from there, I'll take you through what some of the next steps are. So working with the local jurisdictions, we compiled a list of projects. We determined other available funding, and they have identified that for us where they could. And from there, we have identified a preliminary short list of projects that are viable within that next 10 to 15 year period. What I'm going to shift out of this PowerPoint, and I'm going to bring up a, if I can, bring up a spreadsheet that identifies the current list of projects. This is not finalized in any shape or manner at this point, but I'll kind of take you through what the list of projects involves, and then where there are some highlights, I'll explain what those are. So we've identified the agency that would be responsible for the project. A lot of these are dual responsibility on the part of Caltrans and Madera County or one of the two cities. The routes are identified, so there are number of routes on 40 projects on 41. There's also other available funding sources that have been identified for all of those projects. And so not just Measure T is targeted for those projects. In fact, a lot of the 41 projects, the major source of funding is from other funding sources. Other projects include on state routes, State Route 99. Again, there would be quite a bit of coordination and cooperation with Caltrans to identify these and to improve these projects. They are interchange improvements where we have deficient interchanges. They need to be modified to enhance safety, et cetera. Also, there are some gap projects that need to be addressed, and there's been even a valley-wide discussion with Caltrans related to these gap improvements. And so MCTC will continue to work with Caltrans to address these gaps. But again, there are funding is looked at from other funding sources, not a significant amount of funding from Measure T for those projects. Then when we get past these state routes, we're starting to look at east-west connectors in the city. In the case of Chowchilla, a flyover project over State Route 99. And then also Robinson and Washington Road roundabout. That's a critical project as well. The city of Madera has identified a number of projects, including bridge projects, which are very important to their constituency, to their residents. I won't go into detail on all of those, but there are a number of bridge improvement projects versus widening projects. And then for Madera County, a number of these projects have been on the books for some time, but looking at Avenue 9, improving the safety along that route, it's a non-safe route at this point, in my opinion. So it does need some widening to enhance the safety and to provide for enhanced mobility for the southern part of the county. We've also got Avenue 12, again, gap projects where we need additional lanes to address those gaps. And then the mountain area evacuation routes to enhance safety and fire evacuation. So that's important to those residents up in the foothill area. Road 145 and 206, again, widening projects. And then when we get to a combination of Madera County and Madera City, looking at Road 23 and Road 29, east and west, north-south facilities that are connecting to Avenue 12 and provide for north-south mobility for both the county as well as for the city itself. So all of the highlights that are in light green were changes that were recently made by the county. Anything in light orange was made by the city of Chowchilla, so they provided us with some additional information. And the city of Madera provided us with additional information in the light blue. Anything in yellow is still on the table. There needs to be a discussion between the city of Chowchilla and Caltrans related to State Route 99 between 152 and State Route 99 for interchange improvements and whether that project is still viable. And anything so that's yellow. There are a few other yellow places where we still need information, data. We still need to know what portion of this funding is going to go from other sources toward the project. So those are still up in the air. And I think those are the major ones. Anything in this orange those are projects that working with the local agencies had identified as potential Measure T funded projects. So when we look at those, we're looking at State Route 99, we're looking at the city of Chowchilla, the east-west flyover. We're looking at a few bridges within the city of Madera, Westbury Bridge as well. And then we get down into the county and we're looking at some of these Avenue 9 safety improvements, widening and Avenue 12, as well as the mountain area evacuation routes. Those orange, as we just approved the allocation for the various programs, 216,500,000 was allocated to the regional program. That's 25% of the measure. When you look at the total of all of those in orange at this point, it totals about 175 million. So we currently have about 42 million still to allocate. We're not ready today to finalize this list in any shape or manner, but we'll continue to work with the local agencies to do that and to fully identify funding from Measure T for additional projects. We still need to receive information on some of these other projects and where the other funding, what the other funding source amount would be, because we definitely want to use Measure T dollars to leverage wherever possible and not fully fund projects, especially large price tag projects. So with that, I'll turn it over to Troy and or Tricia to make any additional comments.
Hi, Georgina, it's Tricia. I think you pretty much covered it thoroughly. I think Troy can probably put in chat what the current measure program has as it relates to the regional program and the flexible and what that percentage is.
Okay.
Just to reiterate, the regional projects are to connecting and for access and for all residents, and they are, as you mentioned, a higher price tag type project. So we will definitely be looking for, some might be fully funded by this and others will need to look for additional sources outside of Measure T. And that's the purpose of the program. So yeah, it's definitely a needed program, the regional pot of funding.
Troy?
Sorry, I was typing the amount in the chat there about the current measure, 26% for regional, and then there was the flexible funds in the current measure have been impounded for the regional program because that was in lieu of road impact fees from the agencies. And so the flexibles have been pretty much impounded from day one because there haven't been either a sufficient impact fee program in place or there were just no impact fees available for some of those projects. So I think you've done a good job, as you can see on this list of, we're trying to make sure we include all projects and look at all the needs. We can't fund everything, and it's all about leveraging. Current measure, we've leveraged over $200 million from federal and state funds. And I think that's important that we try to do that in there with the extension.
Reason why I had Troy put in chat is just to note that it is a slight reduction. So it is a reduction in comparing the two programs from the current measure and the future measure. So we'll have to rely on, revenues being generated will increase over the years as well. So just wanted to make that point.
Thank you for that information. Any questions on this? I see most of the questions were regarding the size of the font. We will work on getting these emailed. This is being worked on until last night, but to people so that you can print it out and have it. Frank?
There I am. I just personal request on this. Most of you might not know, but I'm only partially sighted. I'm legally blind. And if I could get a printout, a hard copy, I could then blow it up with a machine I have at home and help me read that. And my contact information is available through Evelyn Espinoza at MCTC or Supervisor Wheeler or Supervisor Frazier. I'll have that as well. Thank you.
Okay.
And Frank, I've already passed that along, so we're trying to work on that already.
Thanks, guys.
We'll work on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And a map of these projects.
the current measure, all the ones that are in the current measure, we do have maps. And so once we get to decide on what projects should be listed in the investment plan, we definitely will have maps to show those locations.
Correct, yes.
All right.
I should note that the total cost of all of these projects is 1.7 billion. And we have 216 million available. So as Troy mentioned, every effort will be made to leverage as much as possible from other funding sources if they're available.
And that's in today's dollars.
Right.
Matt Treber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If Georgina, maybe if you could just touch on that and maybe expand briefly. But we have 1.7 million, but those other two columns next to it, those are
Okay.
just so I think I can,
Right.
maybe I'm the only one, but
Yeah, the middle column was other funding available. That's been identified so far. So almost $1 billion has been identified from other funding sources.
Okay.
By the local agencies, by yourself and the two cities. And then this is the Measure T, the ask for Measure T dollars by each of you as well. And it totals around 699 million, so almost 700 million. But we only have, again, 216 million available. So we're not going to be able to accommodate all of these asks, all of this request.
so I guess it's not as bad as 1.7 billion, right? I guess we only need.
Right. No, that's true. Development is covering quite a bit of these project costs.
Okay.
As well as other sources like Caltrans, or some of these are operational improvements. So they're covered by Caltrans or by the local jurisdictions with other funding sources. Or other federal and state dollars.
Thank you. I think that's important to know, because I think there's a lot of talk about hearing the same things, and I think also there's a frustration to keep hearing the same thing, that there's not enough money. It's important for us to focus on doing what we can do and always seeking it out. And I know that we do that, and it's easier to just say there's not enough money. Because it gets frustrating to keep telling people that there's not enough money and we can't do it. But we are constantly looking for every other avenue to fund these projects. And so we need to figure out a different phrase to say that we don't have enough money. It's we need to manage those expectations more. We can't keep saying the same thing. Frank?
It's remaining creative, flexible to leverage.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
What I was going to ask is there anything that we as members of this committee or other people can do to help reach out to state officials to see what we can do to help direct attention our way, get money, maybe invite to a Rotary Club lunch, anything like our congressman, our senator, persons to say, we'd like to show you what local needs we have. What can you do to help us? I mean, are these things that you'd like us to do, or could we coordinate it through MCTC, maybe an effort to do this? And would that even be helpful?
I'll respond to that. It's definitely helpful. And we do work with our local elected officials at the state and federal level to try and educate. So our voices are heard locally as well as regionally, and we also speak in one voice with the Valley. So it's a constant work in progress, I guess, if you will. And so we do take that under consideration through our programs, and we do speak in one voice and speak out and work with our local electeds. So definitely not a waste of time.
If there's something you think that we could help with, please let us know. And we can use our various clubs and influence to help you.
Yeah, your voice is very helpful in a lot of letters of support, which we do reach out to a lot of agencies and organizations for letters of support for funding for certain projects. A lot of it, as you heard through this process, is grant-based. And so we need to compete. And so the more letters of support we get, more successful our grants may or may not be. So we have not really reached out to the Rotaries, I don't believe, to get letters of support. We'll take that advice.
Like right now, we have a mega grant out for another 90 million for the station relocation project. That having those letters of support, I mean, $90 million for, shows that, even though there's 4% on public transit, like, we're doing that in other areas too. We're actively seeking out those grants and with other partner agencies that we work with. So, so if you want to get a letter together for that one, I appreciate it, Frank.
We'll reach out to you.
I will definitely do that.
All right. So we got, okay, Rhonda's question was answered. The 216.5 million, what time period is that for? 30 years. And Rob said creating the maximum out of the minimum. All right. Next, do we need any action on this?
No, we'll continue to work with the local agencies to refine this list and get to a point where we have allocated the 216,500,000 and bring it back to the group for review and approval.
Okay, thank you. Next item.
And let me get back to that here. Okay. So the public engagement update. Oops, Alex.
It's me. I will be brief because you will be hearing a lot from us next Thursday at our meeting. So next Thursday, we're going to have Tim McLarney come and present poll results to the group from the voter survey that was conducted. We call it a tracking survey, just to check in on the measure and priorities of the voters. So you'll have a chance to ask him questions and hear the full presentation next Thursday. So you don't want to miss that one. And then additionally, myself and Charles, we are in the middle of tabulating all the community surveys that we got from the mailer. We got a very nice response. So thank you to MCT staff who's been helping input them in online from the mail-in versions, and we got quite a few from the online version. So we'll share that, and you will have comparison from the mailer data as well as the scientific survey next week. So stay tuned. And we've also been working with MCTC on social media outreach. So for anyone on this in the steering committee, look out for posts and please help share them to help spread the word.
Thank you for that. And yeah, everyone come back next week for that. All right. Next item.
So the next item, staff items, we have the schedule. Right now we are showing today's review of the potential regional project priorities. Of course, we approve the allocation funding as well. The next meeting, we're looking to, as mentioned by Alex, to review the poll results, to bring back these regional priorities on May 5th, and to potentially implement or initiate discussion of the implementing guidelines. We've kind of been doing that all the way along. We'll also have the community engagement status update. Also, at another additional meeting in May, and depending how well we do with these other products, we'll be looking again at community engagement, the implementing guidelines, and then looking to at least bring to you an outline of the draft Measure T renewal plan itself, the investment plan. In June, we will be looking to finalize the implementing guidelines and continue review of that draft plan, and then finalize that plan and recommend approval of the plan to the MCTA Board of Directors. we need to have the plan out by the end of, see, I think we were going with the plan. Yeah, out in June, available for public comment. It would be placed on the, it would go to board approval in July and then placed on, or asked of the Board of Supervisors to place it on the ballot in November of this year. That covers the schedule.
All right, thank you so much. Any questions on the schedule for anybody? All right. The next meeting date?
Is May 5th. So that's next week. It's coming up quick.
That's next, oh, my birthday is the next day.
Oh, no.
Wow. Nice. We'll have to have some cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, virtual cake.
Virtual cake.
If we can
Yes,
mail
there
it
you go.
out. All right, so item 7, public comment related to items not on the agenda. Is there any public comment related to any items not on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call close to that public comment portion. And everyone feel free to contact MCTA staff for additional information. All right, that's the end of the meeting. See, 13 minutes to spare.
That's pretty good.
Once again, leadership you can trust.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
All right.
Bye.